He was standing in front of his own house, just another quiet evening in the neighborhood. But then, two men in uniforms stepped forward, claiming they were HOA police. Their voices were sharp, their eyes filled with suspicion. They said he didn't belong, that he had broken rules he'd never even heard of. In that moment, it wasn't about rules, it was about race. What they didn't know was that this man wasn't just another target. Who exactly had they just threatened to arrest? It was supposed to be just another ordinary evening. Daniel Carter had lived in this neighborhood for 5 years, paying his dues like everyone else. He kept his lawn trimmed, waved to his neighbors, and never missed a community meeting. To most people, he was just another resident, a quiet man who kept to himself. But to some, Daniel was something else, a target. That night, he returned from work carrying nothing more than his briefcase and a tired smile. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the street. Families were setting out trash bins. Porch lights flickered on one by one. It was the kind of scene that should have felt safe. Yet, in the silence, there was an edge, a sense that someone was watching. Daniel didn't notice at first. He was thinking about dinner, about calling his sister back, about the weekend ahead. But across the cul-de-sac, a car slowed down. Too slow. Its windows dark, its engine idling just a moment too long before rolling away. He brushed it off. After all, wasn't this supposed to be a good neighborhood? But good for who? Daniel knew the rules here weren't written down. The way some people glanced at him, the way conversations stopped when he walked by, it was a reminder that to them he didn't fully belong. And that night, as he walked up his driveway, a new reminder was about to arrive. Two men, in crisp uniforms he had never seen before, waiting with a purpose. What they wanted wasn't written on any HOA notice. And what Daniel didn't know was that this encounter would expose truths far bigger than a neighborhood dispute. The two men in strange uniforms stepped forward with the kind of confidence that came from power, real or imagined. Their patches read, "Neighborhood Enforcement," a title Daniel had never seen in any community document. Still, they wore it like it was law. One held a clipboard, the other rested his hand near a holster. Not a police-issue weapon, but something meant to intimidate. They blocked Daniel's path before he could reach his front door. His briefcase felt heavier now, his driveway suddenly unfamiliar. They spoke of violations, of trespassing, of failing to comply with regulations. The words came fast, official-sounding, but hollow. He knew what this was. They weren't here about grass height or parking permits. They were here because of who he was. For a moment, Daniel's mind raced. Should he laugh at the absurdity? Should he argue? Or should he simply comply to avoid the inevitable escalation? Because deep down, he recognized the pattern. He had seen it before, authority created out of thin air, designed only to control people who looked like him. Neighbors began to peek from behind curtains. Porch lights clicked on. Shadows lengthened as quiet whispers spread across the street. Why was Daniel being confronted? What had he done? And the unspoken question that hung in the air. Was this about rules or about race? The man with the clipboard flipped through blank sheets of paper as though they contained evidence. His partner shifted closer, a predator circling prey. The space around Daniel tightened. Every second stretched longer. Every glance at their cold stares reminded him of stories he had read too many times. Black men stopped, questioned, detained for no reason other than existing in the wrong place, in someone else's eyes. But this wasn't a street corner. This wasn't a traffic stop. This was his own driveway, his own home, and still it felt like he was a stranger standing on borrowed ground. Daniel's chest tightened as they ordered him to step aside while they prepared to process him. The words carried a dangerous weight. His mind replayed headlines of men who hadn't walked away from confrontations like this. Would this become another story the world debated after the fact? Would he become a statistic in a place he had called home for years? He could feel the eyes of the neighborhood pressing against his back, waiting to see what would happen next. Was he going to resist? Was he going to surrender? Either choice seemed like a trap. Then came the sharp command. They were placing him under detention, not arrest, detention. A word that sounded invented, yet carried the same threat as handcuffs. Daniel exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. He had trained for pressure before, but never like this, not when the battlefield was his own front yard. His mind screamed at him to reveal the truth, to expose who he really was. But another part of him whispered, "Not yet. Wait," because sometimes the most powerful move isn't revealing your strength. It's letting your enemy believe you're weak. As the fake officers tightened their stance, closing in around him, Daniel knew this moment was more than a confrontation. It was a test of patience, a test of identity, and maybe a test of survival. The question was no longer why were they here, it was how far were they willing to go. The moment snapped into focus when one of the men reached for his wrist. Cold authority in his grip, empty authority in his words. They weren't asking anymore, they were taking. Daniel's driveway became a stage. His life the performance everyone suddenly wanted to witness. The neighbors' windows glowed brighter, some phones tilted in shaky hands. Recording, waiting, judging. Daniel's pulse thundered. He had spent his career preparing for threats, studying deception, facing men who lived in the shadows. But never had the danger felt so absurd, so close, so personal. These weren't cartel leaders or foreign agents. They were imposters in cheap uniforms. Yet the fear they stirred was real. Why? Because the badge, no matter how fake, carried weight when pointed at a black man. His breath quickened. He knew the statistics. He knew the names. Men who never made it past moments just like this. His mind whispered, "This could be you. One wrong move and you become the headline nobody forgets." The man at his side muttered about compliance, about resistance. His partner's hand hovered near a weapon, fingers twitching. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. How long before one of them decided force was necessary? How long before his silence was mistaken for defiance? Then the breaking point. They ordered him to kneel. His briefcase slipped from his hand, thudding against the concrete. The sound echoed like a warning shot in the tense air. Gasps from across the street. Eyes wide. Phones zooming in. Every second stretched into eternity. But Daniel was not who they thought he was. He straightened his shoulders, steady and unshaken. And with a voice that cut through the night, he revealed the truth they had tried to bury under their fake authority. The words weren't shouted, they didn't need to be. They carried the weight of training, of power, of someone who had seen more than these imposters could imagine. The crowd froze. The fake officers froze. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Because in that moment, they realized the man they had tried to break was the very man the real police feared to cross. The silence that followed Daniel's revelation was heavier than any threat the imposters had thrown his way. Their hands, once so firm and commanding, trembled with hesitation. The crowd that had been watching in uncertain curiosity now leaned in, stunned. The same man they thought was just another neighbor. A man cornered, humiliated, stripped of dignity, was suddenly revealed as someone untouchable. The fake officers stepped back, their false authority collapsing in an instant. The holster, the clipboard, the sharp tone of command. All of it meant nothing now. They had tried to intimidate the wrong man, and the truth burned hotter than any weapon they carried. But here was the chilling part. The crowd's gasps weren't just about who Daniel was. They were about what might have happened if he hadn't been him. What if Daniel had been a teacher, a bus driver, or a young college kid walking home? What if there had been no badge, no title, no shield of power to stop this from spiraling into something irreversible? Neighbors exchanged glances, the weight of the question pressing down. If this could happen to an FBI agent, what chance does anyone else have? Daniel didn't celebrate his reveal. He didn't need to. He simply stood tall, collected his briefcase, and walked past the stunned men who had thought they could own his story. Their silence was louder than any apology. The neighborhood watched him go, some with shame, others with unease. And deep down, every single person knew. The system wasn't broken in this moment, it was exposed. The next morning, whispers turned into stories, stories into headlines. But the truth remained the same. Racism doesn't always wear a uniform, but when it does, even a fake one, it still has the power to terrify, to control, to wound. Daniel had survived, but not because the system protected him. He survived because he carried a title, a position, a name that forced fear into the men who confronted him. And that raises the question no one in that neighborhood could escape. Backhand index pointing right: if protection only comes with power, who protects the powerless?